Hello again, this is Preheat. Welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. Today we're going to be talking about a spec that's looking very strong in the raid in Season 3, and it excels at single target and especially 2 target and even 3 target. This is a spec that is fairly easy to pick up, and I think if you just hit the target dummies for maybe about 5 minutes after you hear my explanation, you should be able to get this down. It may not have the priority damage of Arcane, so it's probably not going to be preferred in Mythic Plus, but it packs such a punch and it's so easy to learn that you really should just check it out and make sure you have it ready just in case it receives any other tuning. Today we're talking about Frostfire Frost Mage. This video will include everything you need to know about Frostfire Frost, starting from the basics. We'll also cover talents, gear, trinkets, stats, your opener, your rotation, and ways you can deal with movement. We have a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and get started. Frostfire Frost is very fast-paced, and there are many ways to play it that all have similar damage, but today we'll be focusing on the way that I and other mages in the Alter Time Discord have agreed is the most straightforward way of playing that allows for the least buff tracking and the most intuitive rotation. And when I say rotation, I mean it. We will essentially be sequencing our spells in the same order over and over with minimal changes that can come about due to Icicle RNG. Now, the most basic rule as a caster is to always be casting. This means you always want to queue your next spell while ending your current one so that there isn't any downtime in your rotation. Mage is one of those classes that can lose a lot of damage due to delays in your cast. If this is happening to you, there's a lot of things it could be, like the spell queue window being too short, the rate you're pressing your keys being too slow, or your distance to the target. But something a lot of players overlook is your latency or your lag in the connection to the server. Even if you think you have solid internet, the route it's taking can be bad and resulting in packet loss and lag spikes. Something that's made a big difference for me in my gameplay across the board is ExitLag. ExitLag is an easy fix. It automatically optimizes and reroutes your connection to reduce ping and eliminate lag, and it also stabilizes your connection. There's no weird VPN setup. It's designed specifically for gamers, and it only affects the games you tell it to. You set it up and then you forget about it. When I was playing on EU servers, this program was essentially the only reason I was still able to play Fire Mage. And if you watch my streams from back when I raided EU, I've been recommending this program for years, so it's super exciting to have them sponsor a video for me. ExitLag supports over 2,000 games and has optimized servers all around the world. You can set up in minutes and let it automatically choose the best routes for you, or tweak the settings yourself if you want to go for that. ExitLag is for anyone looking to improve their performance, not just professionals. Their Gamer Month promotion currently gets you up to 72% off. They also have a great deal going on right now. You can sign up for a free 3-day trial by clicking the link below. In case you haven't watched my latest video and you're wondering why should I even care about Frostfire Frost, this right here, this is the kind of damage we're going to be doing. 6.25 million in single target, up to 10 million at 2 target, and this isn't the case where the rotation is impossible because it's so easy, and you'll know why by the time you watch the end of this video. All right, when it comes to talents, this is what I'm kind of thinking for Frostfire Frost. And on the class side, you can definitely change these up if you want to pick more utility. But, you know, we're getting some pretty nice value out of like this barrier talent here, since we get double barriers whenever we're playing Frostfire. On top of that, we also have a new talent here, or I guess a returning talent, but it's been buffed. They remove time anomaly. We no longer have a choice node there, but instead we get a buff that only affects us, but increases our damage passively whenever we have Arcane Intellect. On the Frost side of things, we are picking up basically every talent that buffs Frostbolt, since we're going to be using Frostfire Bolt a lot. And you'll notice that we are not taking Everlasting Frost, and we actually won't even be pressing Frozen Orb unless we need to for movement reasons. That is not expected as part of our single target rotation. And we also have all sorts of talents that are affecting our Frostbolts, giving us cleave, giving us increased damage with them, making them proc Frozen Orbs on their own, and also increasing our damage during cooldowns. For the version of Frostfire Frost I'm teaching you, I recommend that you just lock in these talents and you don't really mess with the ones on the Frost side, because they're going to be really good in single target, 2 target, and even 3 target. You can just kind of lock this in and have fantastic damage. All right, so when it comes to stats, we want kind of an equal distribution between haste, verse, and crit in that order. So haste is going to be our best stat. Versatility, we also want to have pretty high. A lot of our damage scales with verse, and it's just really nice to have that damage reduction. And then critical strike is pretty good up into a point, but then it starts falling off. Now notice I'm not actually at the Shatter cap, I'm only at 27%, but around this range is kind of where you want it. Obviously, sim your own character to see which stats you want to run, but you probably don't want to go too far above this. When it comes to our tier bonus, it looks like we want to go with pants as our off piece because the tier pants have mastery on them, and we're kind of trying to avoid mastery for the most part. Now, obviously, you don't really have a lot of flexibility in the gear that you run in the patch because your cloak is locked by the quest cloak. You also have your boots, which are doubling your cloak's potency, right? Or increasing it by some amount, depending on the difficulty. And then we also have like our embellishments, we have our trinkets, we have our weapon, which has a set bonus, we have our tier. So really the only flexibility here is like one off piece and then your jewelry, right? Your neck and your rings. So since we are looking to not run too much mastery, but other specs that we might want to play, like for instance, Arcane wants a lot of mastery, we probably want to have in our bags some jewelry that we can use as kind of the fixer to fill in the blanks, maybe move a lot of our stat distribution away from the stats that we want for Frostfire into whatever other specs. So it's actually pretty flexible to play more than one spec of Mage in Season 3. The jewelry is really the make or break part of this. Now, whenever it comes to our embellishment, we are using it on the offhand. This is giving us Ascension, and we are doubling it with either the wrist or the belt. Obviously, you're going to have a good belt going into the patch, so more than likely, you want to craft wrists now before the patch hits. That way, you can have them ready. You really don't want to be spending a spark at the start of the next season on wrists, right? So just go ahead and take care of that right now. And obviously our weapon has a set bonus on it, and it doesn't require this specific weapon. There's also a dagger that we can use instead, slightly different stats. It's really up to whatever drops for you on which one you're going to use, but it's very powerful, and you definitely want to get your hands on the Void Glass weapons. And then when it comes to trinkets, the best trinket is going to be the Ritual Forge trinket. This comes from the raid. This trinket has a 2-minute cooldown, and it increases your int in a big way, but it does cost you HP whenever you use it, and it lasts 30 seconds. So very, very powerful steroid trinket. We also have a pretty good trinket from Dungeons. I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce this name, but basically there's these little mites that come out, and then they give you intellect whenever they get done damaging the target. Now, of course, if you don't want to run Dungeons, you can always go with another raid trinket. This is the Void Core trinket. And there is a little extra added value to this trinket if you start the fight with very little mana. So for instance, if you were to cast a whole bunch of Arcane Explosions before the pull, get your mana value very low, then you're going to get increased value on the pull, which is actually kind of nice. And then it doesn't really matter which race you play. I mean, to be honest with you, it's really up to you. But I think the best races, at least when it comes to Sims, are looking like the ones that give you some sort of crit bonus. So that's going to be something like Tauren or Dwarf. Dwarf has the added bonus of having Stoneform, which is just very, very good for getting rid of magic debuffs in Mythic Plus and in Raid, so you're going to recommend that one if you really care about which race you're going to play. When it comes to Frostfire Frost, we're basically trying to build these Icicles. This is our mastery whenever we cast any sort of builder spell, so that's going to be like our Frostfire Bolt, our Ice Lance if we have a proc for it, also our Flurry. This is going to give us 1 Icicle, potentially 2 with a certain talent. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. But we're trying to get to 5 of these Icicles. Now, once we have 5 of these Icicles, we're able to cast a really awesome spell called Glacial Spike. This is going to use up our Icicles and do a ton of damage to those mobs. In addition to that, our tier bonus is going to cause us to cast a Pyroblast with that too. And as you notice there, the Glacial Spike and the Pyroblast both split. When it comes to cooldowns, we have Flurry as one of our main DPS buttons. It does have 2 charges, and we get a lot of refunds for Flurry due to procs on Brain Freeze. And we also, just passively doing the rotation, will be using excess fire. So we'll be refunding that at kind of a good rate. We also have Frozen Orb, which we don't really have to use unless there's a lot of movement. So if your Shimmer and your Ice Flows isn't enough and you need additional movement after you spent your Ice Lances, you're going to just go ahead and throw out the Frozen Orb. You always have it ready because you're not using it in the rotation unless you need it for movement. In addition to that, we also have Icy Veins, and this is our main cooldown. We use this every 2 minutes. It gives us haste. It gives us damage. It also summons a water elemental that's going to do passive damage and provide us with even more flurry procs. Comet Storm is going to be another one of our spells, and basically we want this to shatter whenever it comes down. It does a ton of damage and calls down a meteor as well, and our meteor is going to be causing ignite damage also due to our tier bonus. So how do we shatter? Basically, whenever we use our flurry, it's going to apply a debuff to the mob with 2 stacks, and then if we use one of those spells, direct damage, it's going to act as if the target is frozen. And also, Comet Storm does not consume one of those stacks whenever it hits, but it does benefit from the shatter. All right, let's talk about the opener. So basically on the pole, we want to have our barrier up already, and we also want to have our mirror images out because that way we don't pull threat and we also take less damage. So there's really no downside to that. After that, we're going to use our Frostfire Bolt, and from that Frostfire Bolt, we're going to queue a Flurry. And the idea is we want to hit the boss with our Frostfire Bolt and our Flurry as the boss is being pulled. So here is Frostfire Bolt into Flurry. We're going to press our Icy Veins here, Trinkets, everything. It can just be one big macro, right? And then after that, we're going to press Comet Storm. As soon as we press Comet Storm, we're now going to press Ice Lance once. And then we're going to throw out an instant cast Frostfire Bolt, because whenever you press Icy Veins, it gives you 1 instant cast Frostfire Bolt. So the next spell, Frostfire Bolt here, instant cast. Don't be alarmed by that. And then use Flurry. That's going to bring us to 5 Icicles here. And then after that, we're going to use Glacial Spike. And while we're casting Glacial Spike, we're going to make a decision based on the state of our Fingers of Frost. So as we're casting Glacial Spike, we think about, okay, do we have a Fingers of Frost or not? Obviously, in this case, I do have one Fingers of Frost. That's this icon right here. So I'm going to queue an Ice Lance from this Glacial Spike. Now, if I did not have a Fingers of Frost here, what I would do instead is I would queue up a Frostfire Bolt after this Glacial Spike. All right, and then basically we do another rotation here. It's resetting. So what we're going to start by doing is casting 2 Frostfire Bolts. 1. It's going to be 2 here. And I'm going to queue up a Flurry from the second one. So 1, 2, Flurry. Now, during this Flurry, you also check the state of your character. This is the other time you have to use your brain. So while you're in the global cooldown for Flurry, you're looking to see if you have 5 Icicles here. If you get unlucky, you're not going to have 5 Icicles here. You're going to have to throw out 1 Ice Lance, and then you're going to Glacial Spike. But if you're already at 5, you can just go ahead and start your Glacial Spike right now, like this. And then after this Glacial Spike ends, we're either going to cast Frostfire Bolt or Ice Lance, depending on our Fingers of Frost. So again, I have 1 Fingers of Frost here. That's good enough. We're going to go ahead and do a Glacial Spike into Ice Lance. All right, and it just repeats again. So it's going to be 2 Frostfire Bolts. 1, 2, into Flurry. See if we have 5. We do. Glacial Spike. See if we have Fingers of Frost. We do. Ice Lance. 1, 2, into Flurry. And then we're going to Glacial Spike, because we have 5. And then we're going to Ice Lance afterwards, and then we're just going to keep doing this over and over again. So remember, the only thing that changes this is if you don't have 5 Icicles, you're going to go ahead and throw out 1 Ice Lance at 4, right? It's always happening whenever you're doing the Flurry. It's always Frostfire Bolt, Flurry, check Icicles. If not 5, Ice Lance once. Glacial Spike, check your Fingers of Frost. If yes, Ice Lance. If no, Frostfire Bolt. Just keep doing the whole thing over and over and over again. And the only thing that changes is you're going to be casting Comet Storm, basically whenever you apply that Winter's Chill, so that it shatters. And then after your Icy Veins ends and your Comet Storm is also on cooldown, you're going to go ahead and use your Shifting Power. And then Frozen Orb, you don't really actually have to use. Like, it's not useful in this rotation, at least in normal scenarios. But if you have to end up moving and you're out of Shimmer, you're out of Ice Cold, and you're just kind of running around, obviously work through whatever procs you have first. And if you run out of those, then just throw out the Frozen Orb. It's a great ability to have for movement because it's just going to keep giving you Ice Lances. That way you have something to do while you're on the move. But believe it or not, this is the entire rotation for the raid. The only thing that could change is if there's a situation where there's a bunch of mobs and maybe you want to shatter them all with your Glacial Spike, you're actually able to root them in place. What you would do is use a macro, it'll be in the description below, to command your Water Elemental to use his freeze ability, which is then going to cause your Comet Storm to crit all of the enemies. Just want to time it like as soon as you press the Comet Storm. Now for the raid in AoE, you should just generally keep attacking your main target, but you are going to change your behavior a little bit when it comes to this Frostfire build. So the first thing that's going to happen is as soon as there is any amount of AoE, you're going to start using your Frozen Orb on cooldown. It just does a ton of damage. And also, if you're in your cooldowns, stick with Frostfire bolting and doing that normal rotation until you hit like 9 deaths chill. But after that, you're going to be throwing out Ice Lances, just kind of following the logic of I'm trying to build with 5 and Ice Lance is totally on the table now. So drop the act with the Bolt spam and just throw out those Ice Lances. It's going to give you about the same boss damage, but you're going to get a lot more 2-target cleave out of that. If you want to really get fancy with it, you can also send a Frostbolt into a Flurry on one target, a Frostbolt into a Flurry on the other target, and then after that, if you do a Glacial Spike, you're going to shatter on both of these targets. So that's a little tech, but it really only works reliably if it's just the 2 targets next to each other. But again, I think you should probably just focus damage on the boss. You're only going to cast Blizzard, though, if you have the Ice Caller talents and these other ones, and I don't think they're really worth it taking these for raid, except for maybe on really heavy AoE fights. I think generally, even if it's less overall, it's probably better for you to just focus on doing as much like 1 to 2 targets as possible, just focusing as much damage on the boss as you can. So the rotation is simple enough, but I want to kind of give you a little bit of background on why it works this way and what sort of things can happen while you're doing the rotation, because you may not always have the procs, right? You may not always have a Flurry. You might be in situations where you get really lucky with your Icicles. So we're going to cover kind of like the edge cases, I guess. So on the pull, obviously Frostfire Bolt and the Flurry, pressing your Icy Veins and your Comet Storm. On this Ice Lance, this should give you 3 Icicles if you have, you know, a relatively normal amount of luck, right? And then we follow up with the Frostfire Bolt. And then that brings us to 4, and then we Flurry, that brings us to 5, and then we do the Glacial Spike, and then we choose, if we have Fingers of Frost, we go ahead and do an Ice Lance from that, and if we don't, we do a Frostfire Bolt, right? But let's say there's a case where you get super lucky in your opener. So we have a talent called Splintering Cold that makes it so that every Frostbolt and Flurry that we do has a 30% chance to generate 2 Icicles, right? So there is a 9% chance in the opener that your initial Frostfire Bolt and your Flurry are both going to proc Splintering Cold back to back. So while you're in the Comet Storm and while you're using Ice Lance, basically in this window, you have time to see that that happened. And if you notice it, that you're going to be at, 4 Icicles here and then 5 here with the Ice Lance, instead of using the Frostfire Bolt after, you're going to use a Glacial Spike just right away. Just use the Glacial Spike, and then you look and see if you have the Fingers of Frost. The rest of this doesn't change, right? If you have the Fingers of Frost, you Ice Lance. If you don't, then this Frostfire Bolt is going to be the instant cast one that you use. But again, this is pretty lucky that this will happen, right? Obviously, in edge case. In most cases, you're just going to go with Frostfire Bolt, Flurry, Comet Storm, Ice Lance, Frostfire Bolt, Flurry, Glacial Spike. If you just want to practice it, 91% of the time you're doing this, right? Now, whenever you're in your actual rotation, luck can affect you too. It's 2 Frostfire Bolts into a Flurry, and then Ice Lance here, if we are not at 5 already, right? And then Glacial Spike, see if we have the Fingers of Frost or not. And then we either send Frostfire Bolt or Ice Lance, and then we just do the whole thing over again. Now, the beauty of it is, since we are doing this rotation over and over and over again, we actually have the check, right? We talked about that being the Flurry. It doesn't matter which case we have happening here. If we get lucky on the first one, the second one, or the Flurry itself, we are always checking the state of our Icicles right here during this global cooldown. And this allows us to make that decision to skip the Ice Lance here and then go straight into Glacial Spike, and then obviously during Glacial Spike you have a lot of time to think. You can see if you have the Fingers of Frost, and then you can decide what to do from there. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Preheat, what if I just get really unlucky, or what if I make mistakes and I don't have any Flurries left? Well, that's totally fine. What you do is you just cast a bunch of Frostfire Bolts. If you aren't getting any Flurries here, you're just going to keep Frostfire Bolting. Now if you do get a Flurry before you reach 5, obviously cue the Flurry right away. And then you're probably going to go into a Glacial Spike from that. But let's just assume the worst. Let's assume you have absolutely no Flurries. We're going to go all the way until we get to Glacial Spike. We're going to use the Glacial Spike, and then the same logic is going to apply. If we have a Fingers of Frost, we're going to do an Ice Lance from that. And if we don't, we're going to use a Frostfire Bolt. Now, a super rare case that could happen is you're going through your Frostfire Bolts, right? And you get to 5 and you got no Flurry yet, right? We're just being super unlucky. But while you're casting your Glacial Spike right here, this is where Flurry finally decides to proc, okay? What you're going to do in this case is you're going to cue the Flurry after the Glacial Spike, and then you're going to Ice Lance regardless of the Fingers of Frost state, because here you're going to have 2 Winter's Chill, okay? And that's going to bring us to 1. And then you're going to start the rotation over again, but just keep in mind, if this happens, you're not going to be starting at 2, you're going to be starting at 3, right? So you're just going to do 1 less Frostfire Bolt at the start there. But this, realistically, this only happens if you're playing correctly like once every 5 minutes. So very, very rare that this is going to happen. For the most part, what's going to end up happening is you're going to just be casting Frostfire Bolt, Frostfire Bolt, Frostfire Bolt. And then like right here, instead of this being a Frostfire Bolt, you're actually going to proc a Flurry right here. So, that's going to save you. And then you're going to cast the Glacial Spike right here. And then you just continue with the rotation as normal. And that's really it. And the reason why you should almost always have Flurries is because every time you do this Ice Lance right over here at the end, or you throw out the Ice Lance like to get to 5 like this, you're going to be using up your excess fire buff. And that buff has a 50% chance to return a Brain Freeze. So you have to fail that 50-50 multiple times to end up in a situation where you don't have any Flurries. Whenever Comet Storm comes off cooldown, remember too that the Comet Storm cooldown is reduced by the excess frost on your Flurry. So if you see you have like 4 seconds left on your Comet Storm and you're pressing Flurry, there's a very high chance your Comet Storm is going to be up right away, and you just want to use your Comet Storm right after that Flurry. So basically just slot it in right here before the Glacial Spike. Using the Comet Storm right after the Flurry is going to be very normal because it's reducing the cooldown at the moment you press Flurry, and you want to go for that because that's going to make the most use out of your Comet Storm. You want to use it right away instead of holding it as long as you have Winter's Chill on the target. All right, and that does it for today. So this build does have some weaknesses. It is a little bit hard to move around while you're playing it, but you always have the backup option of using your Frozen Orb, Be good with your movement. Use your procs whenever you need to fill in the blanks during the movement. Throw out those orbs, and I think you'll have a pretty good time with it. Also in 2-target, if you're using more Ice Lances, that's totally fine, right? You're just getting more Splitting Ice value out of it. So that's great. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in playing Frostfire Frost, if you're willing to dabble into a spec that very often ends up not being meta, but could be very good this tier. And also, if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.